this film, kind of for anybody who doesn't know where the story comes from, it's based essentially on a Twitter thread that the real life Zola published way back in 2015 about this insane trip that she had with this woman that she'd sort of met at her place of work. That's the premise of the film. The film itself is an incredibly made, astute, smart, funny, but most of all, visually fascinating and bold piece of filmmaking, because you're dealing with an online subject matter, and instead of going in a very literal way and filming the screen and filming Twitter and all those conversations that might have happened, it goes completely wild. It goes very creative. It was shot on 35 millimeter, this with a score by Mika Levy, who obviously genius with a capital G. And the director of this film is extraordinary. So this is her second feature film, I believe. And she just uses sound design, and there's chirps of tweets. There's the whooshes, not necessarily of emails, because who communicates by emails? She does this creative kind of way of visualizing online conversations. And especially the thing that really struck me with the storytelling is the fact that she uses this kind of looking to camera and the unreliable narrators, this exaggerated vibe that you get with people telling their stories online. It completely becomes translated, but in a purely cinematic way. So for anyone who might be thinking, oh, well, this is another film based on a tweet, it's just going to be some basic online thing. No, this is pure cinema. Janica Bravo, who's the director, just goes completely creative with this thing. There's this crazy story at the heart of it. And for anyone who didn't read Zola's 2015 Twitter thread, it's still online. You can find it. And it's really interesting to revisit it after you've watched Zola, because essentially she is a waitress and a part-time stripper, and she meets in a restaurant Stephanie, who's played in the film by Riley Q, and Zola is played by Taylor Page, who I might add both of them are extraordinary in the film, just
So good.
so charismatic. Cannot stop watching them. Would watch everything with them in it, together, separately. I mean, Riley Q has already been a favorite of mine for years, and they meet, and you know when you sort of just click with someone and they just look at each other, and it's not necessarily romantic, but it's just a vibe, and they start
Mm.
texting, they start chatting, and then Riley Keough's Stephanie proposes a trip to Florida to make some money over a weekend in a club dancing, and she's not exactly being very honest about that. So there's a wild road trip that happens, where Zola, who's very level-headed, very pragmatic, very sensible, kind of, she's going there for the money. She's fine. Like, I'm gonna make like a lot of money over the weekend. That's great for me. But things start to smell fishy really quickly, because in this little road trip we've got Stephanie's boyfriend Derek, who's played by cousin Greg. I'm sorry, Nicholas Brown, playing cousin cousin Derek.
Yeah.
Well,
Basically,
cousin
it's
Greg's
cousin
dodgy
Greg on
cousin.
spring break, isn't it? Basically.
Yes. It's cousin Greg's dodgy cousin Derek,
Yeah.
who thinks of himself as sort of some sort of gangster type dude. He is not. He's the biggest loser of them all. And bless him, he cannot see what's going on.
So funny.
And it's got Coleman Domingo, who is just pure charisma, as Stephanie's essentially pimp. Because things start getting very complicated. And I don't want to really talk too much about the plot,
Yeah.
because one of the big joys of this film, especially if you're not familiar with the Twitter thread, is seeing what happens, because there's no way of predicting where the story is going to go. And the way that Yannicka Bravo kind of uses all the tools in her cinematic arsenal to play around with the insanity of the story is what makes it so much fun.
I think as well, there's an amazing, I don't know, amazing kind of confidence in her filmmaking, in the way that she's constructed the film, and the way that she, like you say about that whole kind of thing to camera, but also the ending and the way that she chooses to kind of just end the film. I think that to have the balls to do that kind of thing and not feel like things have to be tied up and, as a kind of perfect parcel, the colorscape of it, I just think it's such a great film, and Mika's score is is kind of perfect. It's a horror film at moments, I feel like, as well, in terms it's terrifying. But yeah, I thought it was extraordinary. Just thought it was so
It's
good.
very intense, and I think Taylor Page as Zola in particular is such a powerful performance because it's very
Oh
physical. You
yeah.
know, there's a whole like subgenre of films that center sex workers or exotic dancers, strippers in particular,
Mm-hmm.
and this feels like it's doing something different. Like she's so business minded and so aware of all the trappings and the dangers of that world and so steadfast as her character in not getting involved with it. And I think, not to get too, it's difficult to talk about it without revealing too much about what happens, but there's so many layered conversations about kind of levels of privilege that exist between Zola and Stephanie. So Zola is an African
Mm.
American woman, Stephanie is a white woman, and the way that they navigate the same situation in the same world is very different. I think Taylor Page's performance in that regard carries so many different levels, knowing that. And part of that conversation is very direct with the audience. She talks about these things very openly. And there's a beautiful kind of almost intermission moment in the film where we see the story being told from Stephanie's point of view, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And there's so much darkness, so much insanity going on, but there's always a level of being grounded in a really extreme reality, and a reality that's
Yeah.
very true and very real for many people, and many dancers and sex workers and African American women in particular. I'm talking about the States in particular because that's where it's said. And also this kind of navigating lies that is very interesting. I saw it at a week or so ago, and I can't wait to rewatch it again when it comes out. And actually, I know I said that profile kind of works better on a computer screen, on a smaller screen at home, but this is one that really needs to be seen in a cinema. And I think because of Mika Levi's score, because how absorbing and eclectic it feels. And I'm
Yeah.
not the best at talking about music, but it just gets kind of, it completely seamlessly goes in with the film. And the visuals of it, there's so many layers between the images and the sound design. I absolutely love the sound design in this, especially how it weaves in with both the performances, the dialogue, and Mika
Mm.
Levi's score. It's just glorious filmmaking to watch on a big screen.
Yeah, I think it's really important you mentioned that whole thing about control and consent, and with Taylor's character Zola, and how in control she is of her situation, and that's something that she takes with her on this road trip in terms of how she's, yeah, like, but as you say, we don't want to say too much about it because the whole experience of the narrative and the storyline and the characters has to be seen. So go and see it on the big screen, as Anna says.
And I think we have a little clip to give a taster of what Zola sounds like, feels like.
Hey, last month I went dancing at this cute spot in Florida where my roommate's girl made like 5 G's a night. My roommate just told me that he going out there tomorrow, and he asked me if I had any friends that want to make some money, and you the first I thought of.
Damn, we just met yesterday and you already trying to take whole trips together? When we leaving?
Be ready by 2.